We'll go live. Hey, everybody. Super excited to have my friend Jill here from San Diego, who has done several VA loan assumptions successfully. Me personally, none. I had one that fell through just the other day. That was a VA loan assumption. So I can't wait to learn and listen and hear the trials and tribulations and how to make it happen. So thank you, Jill. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. And I'm not sure I know all the loops and hoops, but I've heard of a few things we can stay away from and a few things that can make them easier.
Yeah, that's perfect. That is what it's all about. It's just learning and growing from each other. So would appreciate anything that you have to share and super excited that you swallowed your nerves and came live with me today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So we always like to start with an embarrassing story. And I know you and I were talking just a few minutes ago. So tell us your embarrassing story.
So I had a time where I was meeting some clients and we were walking and talking and they were ahead of me and I was texting to find the code to get into this property and being all cool and looking at my phone, and there was a ladder coming from a work truck and I did not see it, and I had my head down texting and not paying attention, which is what we're not supposed to do, and I walked straight into the ladder and I thought my face was bleeding. I had to kind of keep reaching for my face because it hurt so bad. I thought it was bleeding, but of course I had to act cool, like it didn't hurt or anything. And I didn't think that my face was going to fall off the entire day, but yeah. And luckily there was no mark. I could not believe that there was no mark, but there was no mark. So
do you know what I did? I always trip. I am clumsy. That's just what I am. And I was showing houses, and they actually ended up buying a house, but I had buyers right behind me, and I went to open the front door, but there was just a little ledge, like a half an inch step up, right? So there wasn't a real porch. It was just that little ledge, but I didn't see that little ledge, and I ate it. And this was a huge glass, like wooden door, but big glass, like huge door. My head almost went through the glass. Luckily, my buyers were behind me and grabbed me. I mean, if they hadn't grabbed me, I literally would have been, I would have definitely had blood running, and it would have been terribly embarrassing. That was embarrassing enough, but I was glad I didn't hit the door.
Well, I almost had another embarrassing story the other day, but I tripped and fell because I was trying to be all adventurous and walk this property in a backyard, and I was wearing sandals, and but I was showing a property to my cousin, so I tripped and my cousin caught me. So, but it was my cousin, so it was like,
yeah, that's good. Luckily,
you
it was
owe
just
me
your
one.
cousin. So tell us about loan assumption. So when I just tried to do mine, I did learn that it takes 90 days to get, you have to apply for it, right? So your seller has to apply for the loan assumption to make sure that it's approved, and that could take 90 days. Now, truthfully, we got to 60 days. There were a lot of hiccups and everybody backed out of it. But that's all I have. That's all the knowledge I have. So tell me what you have.
Okay, so I think that is the biggest thing, is going into these knowing how long it's going to take. So, for example, I have one that is coming up. I thought it was coming up next month, but turns out their renters are moving out early, and so it's coming up this week. So I got with my sellers and I got the name of the bank, their loan servicer, so that we are good to go and ready right away with who that loan servicer is, and call and know what that particular servicer, what their timeline is.
So that's a good point. So did you do it right at listing? Like, hey, I'm going to list your home. You have a VA loan. Let's call and see if it's assumable.
So they're all assumable. So
Okay.
that's the good news. All the VA home loans are assumable. So we know that going off the bat. But I believe that different servicers have different timelines.
Okay.
And so the one that I think that, so it's kind of like the whole short sale thing
Mm-hmm.
where we just all of a sudden there was a million short sales and
Right.
no one had been doing them. And so the banks got bogged down. Same thing with the VA assumable for so very long. They've always been assumable, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for so very long, our interest rates were so good and there wasn't such a difference that it really wasn't a thing and it wasn't really worth doing. But now, as the interest rates popped up in 2023, all of a sudden it made it crazy where everybody was talking about them and trying to do
Right.
them. And the VA wasn't ready for it. And no one was ready for it. And no one had anything in place. So it was taking much longer than I find that it's taking now.
So
But
go ahead.
I think that your key is to find out with that servicer how long it's going to take. Because they'll tell you right up front how long it's going to take. And so on the first one that I did, my seller had already called like 2 weeks ahead of time before we put it on the market. And he knew that it was going to be 60 to 90 days, but he had already kind of started getting the ball rolling with them.
Yeah.
That one we didn't end up doing, but
That's okay.
yeah.
But to start at the beginning, it sounds like is the key. And in my situation, I didn't represent the seller. So I represented the seller as a buyer. So they were moving from Virginia to Wilmington. The agent in Virginia was trying to do it and it just all fell apart, which in turn caused it to be chaotic here. But it seemed like I know that I talked to somebody else about an FHA loan assumption. And for the FHA, it couldn't be written prior to 2013, I thought.
So now you're going to ask me about what I was.
Okay, that's all right. That's all right. Sorry,
that.
I might be going off on the wrong. Okay, tell me what you have. So first, you get it listed. You talk to the service provider for the loan to determine how long it's going to take and get that ball rolling.
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
and then you get your seller involved so that your seller is calling the servicer and everybody's kind of touching bases with
like hounding them. You're just staying on top of them to make sure that they are doing it.
Yes. And the buyer can call as well.
Oh, wow.
And even better if the servicer is able to give you their contact information for the person that they have at the VA as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So, and that's what I was going to say is I don't know about the FHA assumables. So I apologize.
We're going to talk about VA.
And I just ran into one recently, but so I wanted to talk a lot about everybody thinks that everybody should do the VA assumable. And so I kind of wanted to touch on what it means for the veteran.
Please do.
Okay, so the biggest thing is your veteran has VA eligibility, and there's a certain number tied to that eligibility. It has to do with calculations based on where you live. So, for example, your eligibility when you're purchasing a home, you have much more eligibility in a place here, like here in San Diego, than you would maybe in Wilmington.
Yeah, okay.
So if my veteran already has a house here in San Diego, and then he wants to go and buy in Wilmington, he might not have as much eligibility.
Okay.
So if a non-veteran assumes that loan, that VA home loan, when you go to do the assumable, if that's a non-veteran, then the veteran does not get their eligibility back. So the veteran's eligibility is still tied to that loan until that loan is completed.
So the only way it's really beneficial for the veteran is if another veteran is buying it and just wants to get that that interest rate, 3% or whatever.
Right. And so that veteran would have to release their liability and
Mm.
for the other veteran so that they can get back their eligibility.
So
So
then,
then they can go and use another. So now, for example, let's say myself, my husband's a veteran, I'm a veteran. Like, let's just say,
thank you
though,
for your service.
we've purchased this home here with our VA home loan, and we're going to want to go and purchase another one. Well, or let's just say I decide, oh, I want to live in Florida. I want to go to my beach house and live in Florida permanently. And I'm going to sell this San Diego house, but I already own that Florida house. So I'm just going to go live there and I'm not buying any more houses because that's my forever home, like whatever. Then maybe I do want to give up my VA eligibility for this one.
Just to
But,
make
but then again, flip side of that is that I only owe, let's just say I owe $500,000 on this house, but I'm going to sell it for $1 million. Well, then that difference has to be made up as well.
And that's what I was going to say. So then if I get a second loan to cover that difference, which loan holds first and second?
Yeah. So the VA home loan is always going to be the first on that. And the problem with that is finding the second.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
So in the example that I gave where it was 500 and 500, let's say that someone had the $500,000 come in with, great. Let's say they didn't have anything, because that's the beauty of the VA home loan,
Zero down.
so you don't need, yeah. So let's say they had nothing to come in with, then I just checked on Friday just to kind of figure out for our call what that would look like, what that second loan would look like. And those rates right now are about at 9.75.
Wow.
I have a lender who just did one and it was at 9.75. So, okay, so my loan here is at 2.75. So let's say 2.75 and 9.75, 500 for each. Like all of a sudden that really doesn't make as much sense.
Right. So it has to be, go ahead.
But for example, I just did this too with my cousin.
Now, hold on. Can I ask you a question? So the second one was 9.75. Is that just because it was a second, like the second mortgage?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the reason? I was wondering because interest rates aren't that high, but for a second mortgage, it would be that high. So I understand now. So you're just trying to weigh out the odds. What is better? But if you owe $700,000, right? If it was $1 million and it was 700 that you could get with the VA versus 200 for the second mortge.
Exactly.
Financially, that would make sense.
And so too, we are finding, and I almost kind of think that we're coming up on something that might be even like these ones are great at 2.25, right?
Yeah.
And I'll just kind of come back for another second and say my son just bought a house in Florida, and this was a great situation. The house was, I'm just going to flat out tell how much everything was. So
we don't know your son, names.
Yeah, my son's a little bit of a hoarder of money, so he did have some money.
He's a smart man.
Yes. So it was a $320,000 house, and he had to come in with $75,000.
Oh wow!
So he had it. So now he's in a house, a $320,000 house that he has a 2.25% interest rate on, and his mortgage payment is, tiny.
That's awesome. No, that's a good positive way. Hey, and anybody listening out there, if you have any questions, and I don't know if Jill can answer all of them because she's not a lender. She has experience with the VA loan assumptions, but if she can't answer, she does have her lender on standby. So ask us questions, put it in the comment, ask questions, and we'll see if we can get them answered. If we can't get them answered during the show, then she'll follow back up, or I can follow back up with you with the answers to those questions. But keep them coming. Okay, talk to us, Jill. That was a great deal for your son. Holy cow!
Yeah, and actually, his particular home VA Assumable, they did that one in 30 days.
Oh wow! No, that's
They
awesome.
I think they were going to have it done in 35 days, but the seller needed to wait for some reason. I don't even know what the reason was, and they ended up doing it in 38 days.
Wow.
Um, so so yeah, I lost my train of thought on that
I
one.
changed subjects. I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm sorry I did that to you. So that was
No,
awesome. So he was able to do it. He's got a very low interest rate, 2 point, whatever you said, which is amazing in today's world. And he came to the plate with the 75,000, which kudos to your son for saving money. I wish my children were more like that. That's awesome. So, but for the average consumer, so you're saying as soon as you get it listed, is there any additional paperwork? Maybe that's where I need to go. Because you're saying as soon as you get it listed, immediately go ahead and start calling the VA provider, that loan provider.
I would do it even before.
Okay.
Um,
Fair.
and very important to find out from the seller how much they owe on that, obviously, because and to talk with the seller about if they're comfortable with a non-veteran assuming that or not, because some of them just are going to say no. So I did one of my listings, and I knew that my sellers were like, no way we would let someone assume that who is a veteran, but we need our eligibility back because they were going to be renting at their next duty station, but then after that, they wanted to buy again.
Yeah, I would think that would be beneficial for any seller to have their eligibility back, because even if you're saying, I'm going to move to Florida and that's my forever home, you never really know.
Right.
And
Yeah.
if it's attached to somebody else, right?
Exactly.
You don't know what's going to happen.
So that's was one thing I was going to say is I had one just recently where one of my buyers called me and so excited because they went into an open house and that agent said that, oh, hey, we'll accept a non,
Oh,
you
yeah.
can, well, actually, maybe they didn't say we'll accept it. They made them believe that, oh, hey, this has a VA assumable home loan on it, and so on and so forth. And my buyers then called me and they're like, hey, we want to write this offer, and yay, and it's an assumable and it's this, and they had all the details about it. And I was like, yeah, but you're not a veteran. And he's like, yeah, but she told me non-veterans can assume this. And, and
yeah.
so I kind of tried to explain it to them. And the actual listing agent was out of town and not answering my phone calls. And I'm trying to be like, hey, I'm going to write this offer, but this is a non-veteran. He's like, I'm texting him and he just was like, just write it. So I write the offer and he comes back and he's like, oh yeah, they're not going to accept a non-veteran, on this. And I said, well, your assistant told my buyers.
Would have been way better if we had named that up front.
Yeah. So, yeah, it is good to know. And I mean, I hate to tell
that's
people.
a good point too. So if you're representing a buyer, is your buyer eligible or not? And that if they're not, it's probably not going to go through, because it's not beneficial for the seller in any capacity really to sell it to somebody that's a non-veteran.
Yeah.
If it takes their eligibility, correct?
Yeah.
I think that's important to know up front too.
And it would be important to know up front. And this is getting like totally into the weeds because
get us in there, girl. Get us in.
It really depends on where you're going and stuff. But like, let's just say someone's coming from you in North Carolina and they're coming out to me in San Diego. They're going to get a lot more eligibility out here. So if they only have a couple 100,000 tied up, Yeah.
Because, like, why are they gonna get more eligibility there just because the prices are so much higher?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I get it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then
And
you
there's
could
a big
still buy a
formula there that
home.
I don't understand, honestly.
So you could buy, well, thank you for saying that. It's very important to realize what you do know, don't know. So then you could buy a home if somebody takes their eligibility in North Carolina for 200,000 and you're approved for 1 million. I guess you still have 800,000 that you could use. Is that technically with a lot of gray in the middle?
Yes. Yes. And also too, and lots of gray and lots of getting in the weeds here a little bit, but let's say that they had $800,000 worth of eligibility left and they wanted to come buy $1 million property here. You only need to have 25% of that difference to make that up. So that 200,000,
You don't have to
if
pay
they had
200.
25,000 down, they could make up that difference in their eligibility.
Ah,
Does that make sense?
yeah. So they just put 25% down of
Mhm.
whatever the dollar
The
amount that they
difference.
need to borrow.
Yep. Yep.
No,
And
that makes sense.
that's one good rule of thought with, or it kind of, the 25% thing covers a lot of stuff. It seems like with the VA home loan, for example, if like, you're, yeah, all that, the eligibility and you're buying above your eligibility, the 25% is a good rule of thumb.
No, I think that is excellent to know. I think
And
everything
then,
that you've said so far is
so one other thing, Jennifer, that I heard that was just like a little bit of a tragic story.
uh,
And this is one thing that, we can,
tell us
if
what to be
we don't,
scared about.
if we don't know what we're doing, we can get our buyers or sellers. This case was sellers into big trouble. This I know a gal who her sellers were selling, and the veteran was, a VA assumable. The veteran was going to assume the new loan, and then they were going to transfer the eligibility. Someone did not pull that veteran's certificate of eligibility,
Mm.
and it closed. And they found out later that he had had a foreclosure at
Oh,
some point and had zero eligibility. And so now that person was in,
so
that
the
seller
seller
was in,
can't use it then, right? Because now they're
and
not.
they were in escrow to purchase another home,
Oh shit.
and poof, their VA
So
home loan
verify.
was gone.
That's a excellent. That's a horrible story, but it's a good one to learn by, right?
It definitively is.
So
Yes.
make sure that whoever's buying that they are truly eligible, not just that they're a VA, but credit wise that they're eligible.
Right. And
Yeah.
and their VA eligibility is intact, or that they have enough for that matter.
So is that how do you find that out?
Your lender can pull their certificate of eligibility. The veteran themselves can pull their own certificate of eligibility. I actually saw one of those the other day for the first time. Like a friend client pulled it and was like, "Oh yeah, here's what I have left," because he had another house and he was wanting to buy a house somewhere else, and he was like, "Hey, can I buy here?" And I was like, "Let me see, what do you have?" And he showed it to me. So yeah,
So they could pull it themselves.
yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah, yeah. I had, do you think we covered good the having to have the gap in between what they owe and what the seller owes on their property vice?
So you want to talk about it real quickly. Let's go over it.
I just wanted to make sure it was clear because so many people don't understand it. So let's say I bought a house for 500,000 in 2020, and now it's worth 800. My loan probably is now like 475. So that is what they are going to assume, only that 475,
That's right.
but it's at that interest rate.
at that interest rate. And then whatever's the difference is what you'd have to get a secondary lender
So,
for.
and I actually just remembered what I was going to
Talk to me.
say to you earlier. I kind of, and I could be wrong because I by no means am I a statistician, or do I understand
Oh,
any
you're a
mortgage
kick-ass
trends,
real
or
estate agent.
I'm not going to predict anything. However, um, in 2023, when our interest rates went up and we thought they had gone crazy, when
Yeah.
they gone up into the
So
fours,
normal.
right?
Yeah.
People were buying at a higher price point, like our prices had gone up. So I've got a few of my military people who are selling now, and they have a higher rate. It's not in the twos or threes, it's in the fours, but they haven't gotten that much equity on those properties. So
Fair.
I'm seeing now properties come up. Like I have one that I just had on the market, but we sold it like super quick. But they really were kind of at, if someone would have come in on that one, it was, the price on that one was 975 and they had purchased it for 920.
Oh, wow.
So we were close, like 75,000 would have bridged that gap there. Um, and it would still be a 4% interest rate.
That's
So I'm
amazing.
seeing that, and that's a pretty, I mean, that's a pretty high purchase price here, right? So let's say somewhere else, like maybe you're talking like 450 to 475, and just a little bit of a gap and would bring you down to 4% interest rate. So
That's amazing.
I'm seeing that we might have some of that coming up.
Oh,
That might
that's a
be,
good point.
yeah. Yeah. And those aren't necessarily big numbers that someone may even be willing to allow a non-veteran to accept that loan.
Yeah. No, I think that's awesome. Girl, you have taught me more today than I learned in the 60 days of my buyers buying here that's selling. But you're right, it is catastrophic when one falls through, because it's
Yeah.
not good when it falls through, because then you have all the snowball effect.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
Christy won't do what this was.
I'd be interested to hear what happened with yours that it took so long.
So it's interesting. So part of it, I have to be careful. So let me be clear. The agent on the other end is none of my referring partners. They are not within Remax. They are nobody I've ever met before. Okay, so I'm gonna say that before I go into it. Since then, that listing agent has been fired.
Oh.
So I think there was a lot of things going into it that made it fall apart. But the only part I got from it was that it was going to take 90 days. They were at 60 days. But also some other things that the listing agent didn't do. For instance, when I have somebody go under contract on one of my listings, I pretty much require go ahead and do the home inspection, do everything up front. So that wasn't done. And when I called that agent to determine why nothing had been done, it hadn't been done because the buyer was trying to save money and waiting to see if the loan assumption would go through before they did any work. To me, that's a red flag. Because
Right.
to me, that means that, I mean, they can't really buy unless the loan assumption goes through, right? I mean, if they're too scared to do a $600 inspection, they're
Right.
not really investing any money in it. So a lot of little things like that were happening. Since then, to be honest, that agent's been fired, a different agent's been hired, and my poor clients along the way, they're going to do a hard money loan to buy. They really want the house here, and the goal is to continue moving forward. So I don't know all the ins and outs of what caused it to not work, but I think it was accumulation of agents not really knowing what they were doing and nobody really advocating strong for the seller.
So are they going to try
Okay,
and,
to be clear, this is hilarious. So my friend Eric, this is my friend Eric.
okay.
I am totally talking about he referred me these buyers. Love Eric. He was not the agent on the other end. He had nothing to do with it. He wasn't in that area. So he did refer the buyers to me. Thank you, Eric. Eric was not the shitty listing agent. That agent has been fired.
So are those buyers still going to try and assume the VA home loan later?
No, that's terminated. They've listed with somebody else and they're now trying to find, it's not under contract anymore.
Oh, okay. That was
That was
got
gone.
it.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes. Very
Yeah.
complicated.
And I think that's a giant responsibility if you are taking a listing with the VA home loan, is that you understand it as a listing agent. And if you don't, find someone who does.
100%.
Right? Because all that stuff could have been avoided.
Yes.
If someone had done their upfront work to get things started.
I 100% agree. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Okay, another shout out to Eric. I'm having bourbon right now. Eric, it is your Buffalo Trace from the vendor that you recommended to me. Say thank you. Anyway, sidebar.
Jennifer was making me jealous because she can have bourbon and it's only 2:00 here. So I thought that was probably not a smart option for
but
me.
it's 5:00 somewhere.
It is. Yes.
Absolutely. So the best knowledge you gave, Jill, is to, if you have, well, not the best, but a lot of what I'm taking in is that if you have a listing that is a VA, that they have a VA loan and you potentially want to advertise it as an assumable, do it immediately. Do it upfront, do it immediately, do it before you get the listing, as soon as have them start the process, correct?
Right.
And then figure out how much, what the seller is willing to do. Are they willing to sell it to somebody eligible, not eligible?
Exactly.
And then talk to them about what the trials and tribulations are of each, right? Pros and cons of each. And then making sure that the buyer is, and then checking the seller's actual eligibility to make sure it's good, but also checking the buyer's eligibility. Oh, wait, is this your lender? I think your lender's popping on. Andrew, Andrew, are you coming in to save the day?
I don't know. I just got the link, so I just jumped in here and wasn't gonna say anything unless you needed me to.
So I think that Andrew is a lender that can answer any questions with VA loan assumptions. So if you have them, ask them. But let's see what people are asking.
And Andrew's as a side note, Andrew was a Navy SEAL. So he has if you Google him, he's got a whole thing that he won't tell you about, but
Google him. We need to know his actual name. Andrew what? What's your
Andrew
name?
Paul.
Andrew Paul. Maybe I should edit my name.
No, I think you're good. I think it's good. So then it's about being knowledge, making sure that the seller and buyer are eligible, checking that eligibility for the buyer. That was the crazy story, because the buyer wasn't fully eligible. Is that it? And then it hurt the sellers.
He lost his eligibility due to
the foreclosure.
Mm-hmm.
So
it was just like a non-veteran.
So check that. I think that's a really good tip, is to make sure, if you represent the seller or buyer, really, to verify their eligibility, to make sure there's no hiccups along the way. Make sure they don't have a foreclosure or anything attached that makes them uneligible. And then to find out the time frame up front, right? When you get the listing, figure out the time frame up front. Is there anything else that I'm missing on?
I don't think so, Jennifer. I think it's just really about, if a listing agent, if you've got a buyer who's looking to do an assumable, make sure that listing agent did their homework.
Yeah. And then I think too, the other thing is to make sure it actually financially makes sense, because in the event that, like you said, the $1 million home, 500,000 is at 4%, 500,000 is at 9%. Doesn't make sense to do that.
Exactly. And that's where a good lender, where, if I've got a buyer, I'm telling my buyer, okay, let's sit down with your lender and let's hash this out. Let's
Oh, I
see
have
if,
another question for you.
Yeah.
So with that, when you're eligible for the assumable loan, you have to stick with the original lender for the assumable portion. Is that correct?
it's the servicer.
Servicer,
Because
the
you're
provider.
literally, so let's say, Andrew, do you guys keep your loans or do you sell them off?
We keep a lot of them. Our servicing portfolio is like $4.5 billion. So, but yeah, the bottom line is that no new loan is being created. So like me as a lender, as a loan officer, like even being on this call, or if a client calls me or Jill calls me and say, hey, I got a client, they want to assume a VA loan. It's like, I'm just doing customer service at that point because there's no loan for me to do, right? These new people are just jumping in and they're just taking the reins of the existing loan. So they're just swapping people. So yeah.
So that's where like let's say Andrew's not the loan servicer, right? They're not the servicer of the loan. It's Penny Mac, let's say.
Sure.
Then we call Penny Mac and walk through that and figure out who our contact is at Penny Mac, and then ask them, what our timeframes look like.
Hey, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and the challenge too, right? Like, if you're a real estate agent, you've got a lender that you use, you're used to being able to call your lender and be like, hey, like, are they qualified? What's going on? Is the appraisal been ordered? The docs out? Like, how are we looking? You're not going to have somebody like super motivated to be like your point of contact, right? Because that loan that's in the assumption process, it's just like, it's in this administrative process going from administrative person to administrative person, so
but the point of the matter is they do happen. And that's kind of what I wanted to really.
That you can make it happen. Your son got an incredible deal.
He did. And
for the right situation, it's an amazing opportunity.
It is. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, I think that's good. Andrew, do you have anything to end us with?
Well, I'm not sure everything that you may have covered, but there is, just like with the VA loan, how there's the VA funding fee, right? There is a 0.5% assumption fee as well. Just something to be aware of. There is a cost to that. And I'm sure you covered it, right? But as a veteran, I mean, personally, unless the circumstances really like worked out for me, most likely I'm not going to let somebody assume my VA loan unless they're a veteran and they're substituting their entitlement for mine.
We just talked about, yes.
Yeah. So basically, when I sit down and talk about it with people, sometimes I'm like, for some people, it's almost like a marketing gimmick, know?
That's what I was wondering too, yeah.
When you list these agents who are like VA assumable loan eligible, like, and all these creeps who are saying, oh, there's an assumable loan at 2, when all the people are coming in the house at the door at the open house,
like the one open house you were talking about that didn't know what she was talking about.
And that's just, it's hype.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah.
But it does happen, I guess, is what it does happen, and can be super amazing when it does.
I think that's awesome. I think it's important for us as industry professionals to know what's available and to make sure that we properly educate our buyers, our sellers, our consumers with what is available. But I think just knowing that it's out there and it's not good for everybody, but in the occasion like your son, it's an amazing tool to have.
It's amazing. Yeah.
I think that's awesome. Well, thank you too. I've learned a lot.
Good.
And I appreciate you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
It was a pleasure meeting you. And Jill, thank you.
Thank you.
I know that you were nervous, but you did an amazing job.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes. Oh, and somebody put in let's see what she has to say. Okay, let's see here. Sorry, Andrew, it covered you up, but let's.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yep. I think Amy's point is just, hey, make sure there's like kind of full disclosure on both sides. Everybody understands what's going on, what these timelines are going to look like, what needs to happen. And for the right seller and for the right buyer, it can absolutely make sense.
Yeah.
So, and
go ahead.
And I was just going to say, just to preface that, a lot of times, like with my son in his case, they were doing a rent back. They needed a 45-day rent back anyway. The sellers did, so it was kind of a non-issue.
Yeah.
And I just had some other sellers, same thing. They needed a 45-day rent back, so that's when it's a non-issue. Or if, they wanted to rent until it went through, like if the home was vacant and they wanted to rent, but yeah, they would need to not need their eligibility for their next purchase.
Andrew, it looks like a lot of people want your information. Maybe you could just put your contact information in the comment section, so anybody that wants your services can call you and know how to get in touch with you.
In with a YouTube account, I'm not sure how this works. Let me see.
You could do it here. Let's see. Let me do this. Tell me your I'll do it right now.
Does this come up in the private chat?
And I can do it for him too.
What's your phone number?
619
619
964
964.
Yep, 9404.
Perfect. Do you have it? Is that extension or anything?
Nope, that's my direct number. And I put my
email?
email. I just put that in the private chat, but it's teamandrew@benchmark.us.
Okay.
And I just saw all the comments now too. They just came up
Yes.
for me.
So I put your information out there. Hopefully it goes out to everybody. But if not, Jill has it. But I did put it. It should hopefully syndicate to all the different places. But if not, I'll work on getting your information out there, Andrew. And thank you.
No problem.
I appreciate.
I love my veterans because I'm a veteran. All I want to do is make sure veterans are taken care of, right? And I think probably everybody on this call probably feels the same way. So if you ever need help with anything, I don't even care if it's not a deal that I'm even working on. Like, I just know that there's a veteran attached to that at the end of the line. So anything I can do to help, I'm happy to be a resource for you.
I think that's awesome. Thank you too. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Y'all have a good, I guess it's afternoon there. It's my evening. I'm gonna go have dinner.
Yeah, and finish your drink. Bye.
Bye, guys.